Texas predictions. It's that time. Let's just predict the Texas season this year. Here's what you need to know. The over-under win total is 10.5. That's very lofty. They've got the second best odds to win the SEC. They've got the fourth best odds to win the whole thing this year. So let me tell you some things I think I know about Texas. I think I know Quinn Ewers should be a really big offensive weapon. He's got skill. He's got the experience. He's playing for the right coordinator. I consider Steve Sarkisian the coordinator there. He's the quarterback developer. Sark's really, really good at that. So you got a multi-year starter there. That should be a weapon. He's among the top 5 in the Heisman odds. Should absolutely be a weapon. There are some parts of his game that are still loose that this year should round into form. The second thing I think I know about Texas is their pass rush should be very legit this year. Now, we got questions about stopping the run. I'll get to that in a second. But Trey Moore was a transfer from UTSA, I believe. Huge pickup for them. Was Anthony Hill's there? And so that's a stud, but you're adding another one potentially in Trey Moore. Pass rush should be there. Havoc rate should be through the roof. No excuse for it not to be for Texas. The third thing I think I know about them is, yeah, they're joining a tougher conference. They sure are. I think the SEC will have a positive impact on Texas. I think it'll collectively raise their level of play, too. Look at this lineup of teams Colin's showing you right now. It means something when you go into any given season, and you know you have to be better than Georgia, Alabama, Ole Miss, LSU, A&M, Tennessee, Missouri, Oklahoma, instead of, all due respect, TCU, Texas Tech, Kansas, Iowa State. Whether they ever admit it or not, folks in Austin and even folks in Norman knew if they take care of their business, the rest of their former conference shouldn't be able to touch them. In the SEC, you could take care of your business and still lose 2 games. Georgia was a really good team last year. They didn't even make the playoff because they couldn't win the conference. And so in this league, when you know you're in this league, it's the whole tightrope walk analogy that I've been making to you. If you walk a tightrope 10 feet off the ground and you walk a tightrope 10 stories off the ground, technically, the process is still the same. However, there's a different level of focus. There's a different way you wake up that morning. There's a different way you eat breakfast, and there's a different way you carry yourself to that 10-story tall tightrope walk than there is the 10-foot tall tightrope walk. Because the ladder, you know you can fall off of, and it may scrape your knee up, but it's not that big a problem. I mean, Mick Foley's fallen further than 10 feet many a time in his WWF career back in the day. 10 stories, though, you're street pizza if you fall. So if you know the consequences are that, then you tend to mentally carry yourself a little differently. I was out there this spring. You could feel it in the building. You could feel it when you talk to folks, not even just on the coaching staff. In the communication department, you can feel it. So that's a big question, but I think that's the answer. I think it'll serve them just as well as them moving to the SEC serves the depth of that conference. Now, as for the questions around Texas, run defense, huge question. Run defense was number 3 in the country last year. They will probably not be number 3 in the country this year. Sweat and Murphy gone. You can't replace those. Now, you can pull the Billy Bean. You know, you can tear the top off a marker and spit it down the board, and you can say we can replace them in the aggregate. Moneyball reference. They got talented players there. It's Texas. They're never going to hurt for talent. But, man, that was big-time talent in the middle. Now, here's why that matters. You've got to be able to control games, or else a bunch of games become one-possession crapshoots. And the best ones are built at the line of scrimmage, and they can control games. That doesn't mean they never get beat. That doesn't mean they never have close games. The control, like Michigan last year, controlled games. They were in one-possession games, most of their big ones, late in the season, obviously. But they controlled line of scrimmage. They could count on themselves to do that. If you don't have that, you could still win, but boy, there's a lot more variance that gets thrown into the potential outcome. The second thing that I wonder is, have we fixed the pass defense in Austin? They were quietly one of the worst in the country last year. They were 116th in pass yards per game allowed last year. Just a total invert of what they were against the run. Washington torched them. This cost them a shot at a national title. Washington torched them in the semifinal, and it was on display there. It wasn't the first time Texas folks saw it, but I think a lot of folks who hadn't watched Texas much said, wow. Well, yeah, it's a wow, because that was a wart they couldn't overcome. Have they fixed that? Third thing, They lost a lot of talented pass catchers. They lost their top 4. They lost their top 5, actually, pass catchers. Now, they added a lot of good ones, too. The way I figure it is, even in the best of worlds, you added all these cats this year. In the best of worlds, you hope to pull even with what you were last year. And if you're beyond what you were last year, that's great, but that is really tough to predict. So Isaiah Bond came over there from Bama. They got Matthew Golden, Silas Bolden, Amari Niblack came over there from Bama as well. If those guys can equal roughly what your production was last year, you ought to be a national title contender. It's a big if. You don't just snap your fingers and do it. And a lot of this portal stuff, it sounds so good. It is so much harder to get sort of across the board pan out on that or validation or verification on that. The staff breakdown is interesting at Texas. So our internal model has Texas with the highest offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, special team combo in the country. We count Steve Sarkisian as the OC there because Sark calls the plays. So OC, DC, special teams coordinator, it's the best 1-2-3 combo in the country. Their offensive and defensive support staff, we've got graded significantly lower. So the overall depth of the quality there could very well be that this looks different this time next year because there's none of me thrown into that model. It's just everyone judged on the same criteria. And so is there a coaching quality depth situation there? There may be, there may not be. But at the front line, they're about as good as it gets in the country. Sark is an excellent OC grade. He is still outside the top 25 as a head coaching grade right now for us. And, that includes Washington. That includes USC. So he's had a checkered head coaching career, so that shouldn't be a surprise. Now, 2023 was great for him. You bake in a few more of those years, and quickly he goes from outside top 25 to inside top 5. So that kind of stuff can happen. And you know what? If Sark really is a new head coach, none of his past really matters anyway. It doesn't matter what he was at Washington, if that's a night and day difference than what he is right now. But in order to be safe, when we work these grades, we're working your whole career, and then we heavily weight more recent. So we do have some recency bias in there. Schedule couldn't be much better. All things considered, Texas could not have asked for a much better introduction into the SEC. Now, they do play 4 of my top 15 teams in the JP poll, but they also play 5 of the bottom 6 teams in the SEC. And, again, you're not going to have an easy schedule here, but that's about as good as you could have hoped for. They go to Michigan in week 2. They start conference play against Mississippi State. What's the best case here? The best case for Texas is 12-0. I'll just go ahead and tell you that. They got a shot to win every game they play. Their toughest game is against Georgia. That's at home. They got Oklahoma and Dallas as they do every year. They got a shot to go 12-0. Their worst case is an 8-4 record. I think it's most likely Texas goes 11-1 this year. I'm really high on them. JP poll has them at number 4 in the preseason. There is still there's a little more volatility in predicting Texas than I think it sounds in my voice. I say 11-1, it just rolls off the tongue. No, I said worst case was 8-4 too. And you don't, I'm just telling you, you don't replace that much talent out wide seamlessly. You don't just magically upgrade quality of quarterback by 15% just because he returned. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. You don't just replace those kind of guys on the interior of your defensive line. You don't just go from 1/16th in pass defense to top 10. So there are questions here, but it's questions relative to the rest of the country. So Texas has got a workable schedule, and their questions are first world questions. They're first world problems. And so with Texas, I'm going to say 11-1, but there's shakiness in my voice. I'm not falling over myself to go and bet max bets on every Texas game. The model may, but we know the model's history with Texas.